Welcome, everybody, to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships with me, host Lucy Cavendish, and author of How to Have Extraordinary Relationships. And today I am delighted to be with Jessica Yip. Jessica Yip is a coach. She does Calling in the One, which I trained in, and I'm delighted to tell you that Jessica was one of my trainers and mentors. So I've had some experience of her, and I've also been in her Calling in the One book group, which was a wonderful and brilliant experience. So at the end of the podcast, you will find out exactly how to contact her. But she's here today to tell us all about her and her work and her relationships, her extraordinary relationships. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you. It is such an honor to be here with you. I always love spending time with you.
Oh, thank you. I love spending time with you. So now we're going to spend some time together and be sharing it with everyone else. So tell me about, how did you become a coach? We were talking a little bit, I kind of know a bit about how you got there, but how did it all start for you?
Yeah, I don't know if you feel this way in life, but sometimes when I look back, it's like everything happened for me to be a coach. But more specifically, when I was working at Lululemon in what I call my past corporate life, Lululemon is a big yoga apparel brand for anyone who isn't wearing sweatpants all day. So when I was there as a store manager, we had to do a lot of coaching. We had a really robust personal development program, vision and goals. I was leading staff meetings, and I really thrived in that one-on-one interaction. I really loved being with people. I really loved getting to the heart of what mattered to them and how this job could be a stepping stone for that. And then one day, suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly, that life started to ache. It was like I couldn't do it anymore because I knew I was supposed to be doing something else. And I started exploring coaching because it felt like the most real thing for me. And that's when I found Calling in the One. I had said it out loud to my roommate at the time in San Francisco. I was like, I need to take a class. And she told me that her therapist had recommended this book that talks about patterns and relationships. And I really wasn't even thinking about relationships, although I definitely needed it. And so she was like, do you want to do the book with me? And I said, yes. So we ordered 2 copies on Amazon, and that's how it started. I couldn't stop talking about the book once I'd started it. And I just knew that this was the direction I needed to go in.
So were you looking for your one at the time?
Not really. I just knew everything I knew in self-development had gotten me where I could go. And then I was sitting there like, is this it? Do you just do this for another 50 years and die? Like, I was like, I guess I like my job and I loved my team and I had a cool life on paper. I was living in San Francisco, like everything was going well, theoretically, but it felt like I was dying inside getting up for this life every day. And that was the most pressing feeling. It was like there was this phantom life that I was supposed to be living, but I didn't know how to get there. Now, with that, I was also in a really horrible situationship that made me so anxious. And I really didn't think I was an anxious person, but I was so anxious, like, staring at your phone, like waiting for it to ring type of anxious, that I was like, something is wrong and I need to do something about it. So it was twofold, but that wasn't the prime pain point.
So what a situationship is what? Because I know this language is quite new to people. So a situationship is what? What is that?
I would say you're involved, but you're definitely not in a serious relationship. Like there's not a commitment. We were basically just hooking up, and he was someone I knew, and there was no exclusivity. I liked him. I definitely liked him more than he liked me. But it was this weird, actually, I don't even know if that's true. We were kind of both, in hindsight, I think we were kind of both just using each other. But it was like a situation, right? Like I wouldn't call it a relationship. I wouldn't even say we were dating. So.
Had you had serious relationships before then? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think you were avoidant? Were you like, oh no? I don't want to get close to anybody.
Yeah, I was definitely that anxious avoidant chemical mix, and depending on the day of the week and what was triggering me, I was either anxious or avoidant. I did have a serious relationship before him. We actually moved to California together. It was one of those, whirlwind, like in your early 20s things, and he was really wonderful in a lot of ways, but I couldn't deal with being in a relationship where someone was that loving. I wasn't quite ready to feel like I could commit to something, right? That's the avoidant, the dynamic, right? Of like, I feel like a relationship is going to be a trap. So I left that relationship. And then it also became kind of this toxic back and forth, like maybe we will, maybe we won't, moment for a few years until we really let it go. So
I'm sure this
like
is
all the things, anxious avoidant. What?
Yeah, this resonates with a lot of people. So, that whole push me, pull you, I want you. Oh no, now you want me. Now I don't want you. Oh, now you don't want me, and now I want you. It could go on for a long time.
A very long time, yes.
So we were just taking you back. We were going to talk about your heritage. Is that the right word of putting the right way of describing?
I mean, I think we were ultimately going to talk about my relationship with my voice, because so much of the calling in the one work led me to coming home to myself. Like even when we're talking about like being anxious avoidant, it's all a coping mechanism. We're all just trying to survive. Like, how do we deal with all the ups and downs that are inevitable in relationships? Do I run away? Do I like grab on really tight? Like it's essentially a survival mechanism, because I didn't know how to actually navigate relationships. And I'm not just talking romantic relationships. Like it's, there were certain work situations I would do really well at work. And then I'd kind of watch myself like reach a situation and be like, I don't actually know how to deal with this. And then cope in some survival mechanism type of way. And so cultivating my voice, like my relationship with myself, my ability to actually say no, set boundaries, actually even say what I wanted, what I didn't want, what felt okay, actually ask questions when things felt weird. That classic anxious avoidant of like, it's really chemical. And then it starts to feel like things are drifting away, but you can't put your finger on it. Like actually being able to pick that moment up and say, can we talk about this? Like all of these skills I didn't have. And so coming home to my voice was an essential part of that. And that took many branches. But when you're talking about my lineage and my heritage, so I'm Chinese American. My parents are both Chinese, ethnically Chinese, but my dad grew up in Vietnam and my mom grew up in Taiwan for the most part. But and I think, anyone who is a child of immigrants can probably relate, but it's not exclusive to that. I think sometimes people just feel like a black sheep in their family. But if you are told that success has to look a certain way, or that they so want you to do well, that there's almost this prescription of what that looks like. We just default to shutting down who we actually are to hopefully fit that mold. So Lululemon was kind of my like way to meet it. Like I really enjoyed a lot of my time there. It was a big company that had safety, which is like my mom's biggest thing. She was like, join a big company and be safe and work there forever.
You work for a big company, you get a pension, you get Okay, so we had fear around insecurity. Yeah, I get that. Of course, she's moved from Taiwan to the States. Yeah, it's a big story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we can get into it, but they literally both grew up in war. My mom was born as their naval ship. Her father was in the Navy. As the naval ship was fleeing Nanking in 1945. Do you know what I mean? Like it was viscerally their experience. He had grown up basically when the Vietnam conflict started with the US. So they both grew up in war. So it was a very real experience for them to want to create safety for their life in the US. So I understood, I understand now where it came from. But when you're growing up in that, it doesn't always feel like people see you and see who you really are. And so I just stifled my voice. It was kind of this moment of like, maybe no one actually cares who I really am. They just want me to be this thing. And if I'm just this thing, they'll love me. And I just have to hide all these other parts of myself. And then that compounded when my younger brother passed, and we didn't really talk about it as a family at all. So there was not only this sense of like, they don't see me, but there was this made up sense for me of like, oh, no one even cares about my feelings. Like the worst thing in the world could happen and we just skip it. So,
Yeah.
so when I think about, I studied with the brothers Corin, who Catherine, the author of Calling, and the one also studied with, and their whole conversation is really about healing voice trauma and coming home to the self and the voice. And so when I look back, I see all the ways that we can shut down, or where I just decided like my voice wasn't welcome in the world. And a lot of this work was coming home to that. So then I could actually be in healthy relationships, romantic or not, or even just have a conversation with you right now.
So you couldn't have done some, I mean, I know this is a podcast, but you wouldn't have been able to have that level of conversation before or dialogue.
No, I mean, I don't think so. Because we have to have a willingness to articulate these are challenging, complex things, right? And grief and war and coming to a really lovely place. Like even now with my parents, I actually feel like we can talk about all of this. We have talked about all of this. But that took me being willing to do it. It wasn't, it wasn't that they meant poorly. It's just that they literally didn't have the resources to talk about, I don't know, what do you say when your child dies, right? Like, what do you say? I have no idea. And being able to articulate this with you, and after all the work I've done studying relationships and those dynamics, and I definitely couldn't have had the level of conversation I have now about it and feel really complete with it, right? That it's a part of my life and it's a chapter that I've been through, and I want people to be able to access it, to learn from it. And then I get to keep building. I think that's what happens if we're not connected to it in a way that we can be generative, we get stuck and we talk about it forever, right? Like people can sit in therapy and talk about the same thing forever and never actually feel better.
Yes, I think that's very key. Have you had that experience? We're sitting on the mat, we're talking to a therapist, we're doing yoga, and we wake up every morning with existential dread. It's like, wow, I'm doing work. I'm working so hard and I still feel terrible.
Yeah, I actually never have been to a therapist. It certainly would have served me when I was younger. But I certainly know that feeling. And I think that was a big part of it, of like, I feel like I'm doing all the things. Like I have so much self-development knowledge, and I'm so like, I'm actually in so many ways, I was very successful and positive and like definitely creating good things in the world. But there was so much a part of me that was like, it just hurt. It hurt and I couldn't put my finger on it. It felt like my heart was really broken, even though I didn't actively necessarily have like a heartbreak to think about. And I think at the end of the day, like when my clients come to me, they're like, I know it's me, but I don't really know what to do with that information. And they want a pathway to actually grow out of it. And I think the term growing out of it, right? Not just get over it, but like we actually have to grow out of these things. Like I had to build this relationship with my voice, and it took practice, and it took a lot of uncomfortable moments of practicing to get out of there.
So how do they work? They're called Brothers Corin.
Oh, the Brothers Corin. Oh my gosh. Catherine gushes about them. Yeah.
Okay, that feels like it was a real changing moment for you doing work with them. I'm just wondering how they work and what you discover.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, they're two like insanely beautiful Australian men who this is their whole life. They're dedicated to helping people reclaim their big voice. And so I did the songwriter's journey with them. So I've dreamed of writing music and singing music my whole life. I was one of those like in the shower, in the car singers. Karaoke terrified me, unless I was like maybe with my family or something. I used to sing with my cousin in the car all the time, so I feel safe with her. But there was so much of me that dreamt of writing music. And so the brothers really work with this dream and reconnecting us with this idea that life and our voice is to be experienced, not performed. So I carry that with me all the time. I almost like wish I could tattoo it on myself, but like experience versus performance. And so what they do is we spend time looking back. Actually, you create a playlist of music that really touched you when you were younger. And then you create a playlist of music that really touches you now. So they get a sense of who you are and what sound means to you and how you digest it. So we do that. It's called musical cosmology. They try to understand, like, how do you digest music? Where does music really hit you? Where it touches you? And then there are a bunch of small exercises. You have to, one of them is called like sing to your butcher, but basically like use your voice in a way with someone who's sort of random in your life. You get an exercise of taking an existing song and rewriting lyrics over that melody, which is also great fun. And so it all warms you up to this experience where they somehow magically channel your like musical taste into melodies, and then you can write music over those melodies that they've handed you. So the EP that I've put out called Ocean, it's 6 tracks, and I actually listened to it before we got on here as prep, because it always grounds me. But I wrote every word of those songs, and that helped me also capture this calling in the one evolution that I went through in a different way, right? Like, not only can I tell the story, but I'm actually capturing it in song. And it's like the best thing I've ever done. I was very shy about it, maybe initially, but I love that album more than I can even explain.
So you have an EP called Ocean.
Yes.
And you're singing on it, and you wrote
Yes.
you wrote the lyrics.
Yes.
They give you the melody.
Yes, because that was like a foreign language to me. It was like something my brain doesn't understand, even though I took like piano lessons when I was a kid. But it wasn't something that came naturally. And
then you record it.
And then I recorded it with them.
Can we listen to it, or is it your private?
Oh, you can't. Yes. No, it's on everything. It's on everything. What? Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Pandora. It's on all the things.
How do you feel about it now? And people say, "Oh, I heard your EP." How do you feel? Do you feel shy? Do you want to hear people's reactions?
There's like maybe 3% of me that still feels shy, but 97% of me now really feels very proud and very happy. Actually, we had a really sweet moment. Trevor, my partner, yesterday, his mom FaceTimed us, and she was like, "Jess, I listened to your song and I just ugly cried to it. And it was so cathartic, and I loved it, and it really moved her." So there's something, like, I know it meant so much to me, and I did it really just for me, but the fact that people listen to it and appreciate it and can connect with the words, like, that means so much to me. And that's actually, when we think about coming home to the voice, I'm thinking about it literally right now. If we can't use our voice, it's hard to contribute to the world. Like, how else are we going to contribute to the world? So when I think about, like, okay, I put out that music, like, that's a way that I can contribute to the world. If it moved someone, just one person, to really deepen into that experience, then I've won. Is
it a story that you're telling? Is it heartache? Is it love? Is it what's the story you're telling in the EP?
It's basically the hero's journey. I don't know if the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, right? So you like start on a quest and then you go through your obstacles, but really, so there's 6 tracks, and it starts with this idea that I am leaving where I am to become the hero that I'm looking for. And, you know, there's questions like, who wins when I say what I really mean? And like, what would it look like to recreate a world where love actually makes sense to me? Is there love that's not a war? It's one of the questions, right? I really grew up in a household where my parents really, there was a lot of love, but there was also a lot of fighting and a lot of these dynamics that we've talked about and that I'm sure you've covered in other episodes as well. The anxious avoidant, like all the coping mechanisms, all the yelling and the unhealthy navigation of conflict. So is there love that's not a war? It was kind of, I was like posing a lot of questions and what journey I wanted to be on. There's a track that's for my younger brother who passed. And I duet that with Thorold, who is the name of one of the brothers. That's one of my favorite tracks, my duet with Thorold. And, you know, there's a conversation about dating. The Ocean is the title track is actually about, like, am I whole enough to share this with someone? Have I done enough work to actually try dating again? There's a track about, you know, really my journey from living in New York City to San Francisco to finding my desert home now in Bishop, California. And then my last track, and this was actually very fun because every track I'd written up to then was something I'd lived through or felt I had lived through. But the last track, called Home, was about the relationship that at the time I was still calling in. And it felt very vulnerable to put words to the experience that I was hoping to take a stand for. And that is a duet with Isaac, the other brother. And it's, it touches my heart. It was one of those songs that like I'd written the chorus and then we changed it last minute in the recording studio together. So yeah, I love this album. It's my entire calling in the one journey, and it's a hero's journey. So sometimes I actually just replay it because I can tell that when I'm expanding, I'm actually going through all those feelings again in many ways.
What an amazing and brave thing to do. Have your parents listen? Do you have other siblings apart from your brother?
I have an older half brother.
Okay. And have your family listened to it? What did they feel?
Yeah, they were so proud of me. It was really cute. They were so proud of me. And like my nephews listened to it and they had a favorite track. And there's been a lot of love. I had friends who were like, oh, we were driving down to Ventura and we actually played your album just on repeat the whole time because we liked it so much. Like there were just moments where I was like, oh my God, like how was this real? Yeah.
So in it, this sense of the journey that you went on, and I haven't really talked about attachment styles of the podcast yet, but you know, I love this sense of, you know, we can find out what our wounds are, let's say, if you want to call it that. But then people get to the thing of saying, well, now I know I'm avoidant because, you know, my mother locked me in a cupboard or something, which felt normal at the time, but now I've realized is completely abnormal. What do I do with that? What do I do with these feelings?
I'm like, it's such a visceral example. I just had to like sit with that for a moment. So essentially, I mean, it's like, when we look at it, okay, the understanding is that I understand that I have been terrified in relationships. Actually, like my first relationship with anyone in the world, my mother especially, with this expectation that this person is supposed to take care of me, used to lock me up. And so there's this understanding that love, there's the meaning made usually in that sense is that love is not safe. And the question would be, what does it look like now that we can't really be locked in a cupboard? Like we're adults. It would probably take a lot for someone to lock us in a cupboard. Like what would actually be the mature, healthy way to be in a relationship instead of just being afraid that someone was going to shut us down like that? What, instead of love just being unsafe, what would it look like to actually create safety? How might we have to show up in a way that created a culture of safety in that relationship? I've been saying this to clients recently, like the way we show up in relationship creates a culture in that relationship. It's a series of agreements and understandings and how we treat each other. So if you create a culture where all you do is scream at each other, like that's the culture. You're allowed to be verbally violent. You're allowed to be frightening. You're allowed to be cruel, right? But if you have an agreement where that's not actually how you navigate things, you create a different culture where you actually get to be safe to talk about what needs to be talked about. And you can actually grow together instead of being pitted against each other. You're actually saying, I'm on the same team and we're tackling this issue together.
Can people receive that? Because I know we're drifting a bit off course, but I'm interested in how you find a voice in relationships. Because you've recorded your album, then you meet Trevor. So I'm imagining, and I'm going to listen to it, that home is that back around, this is what I long for. This is what I'm going to contribute. This is what I need for my, you know, my person. This is the home I want to create. Is it like that track?
No, actually. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. There's all the lyrics are on my website, so jessicayip.com. And they're also with if you use like Apple Music or Spotify, you can view the lyrics, so it's all there. But I think the story is, you know, with Home, it's me arriving at a place where I can actually say, I think I'm ready to have someone in my life, really ready. And the first time I felt ready, I called in my cat, Osiris. But the second time I felt really ready. It was Trevor. And there, there are some lines in it where it really was my evolution. Like, all that you are and all that you're not are all that I want now. So there was this letting go of needing someone to be a certain way, that I could actually just love someone as they were. So that was one release. And if you really wanted to trace that all the way back, it was also releasing the expectation that my parents were going to be any different, right? That I could actually appreciate them for what they are and what they aren't, because I can be responsible for the things that we're missing now. Right. So that translated into the track. And there's this really deep appreciation for what someone has been through on their own journey. And then this sense of building together, right? That home is our relationship, and we can move through life in it together. So that's essentially where that track goes.
I love that sense of letting go of the expectations of, suddenly my parents are going to be the perfect parents, or I'm going to meet a partner and he or she or they are going to be, the missing link or something, because that's not really, how it works. That's, I think, what you're saying, that it's actually a deep level of acceptance. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, I think, what you're saying of like, it really isn't how it works, right? Like, we can't just say like, I need you to be all of these things. There's so many nuances here, so I want to be careful. I didn't, I think everyone has this idea of like, there's this magical ideal person. And we need them to be that way to fill all the gaps that we've felt before. And and what we're doing in calling in the one, and what I think you're doing also in your practice, is that we actually have to be in motion on those things ourselves. I always make this analogy. I'm like, are you just going to sit and starve while you wait for a date to feed you? Like, no, that would be ridiculous. Right? Yes. So you actually have to be in the process of feeding yourself before you can say, I have room for someone else to sit at this table. And occasionally they're going to feed you and you're going to feed them. Right. Yes. But you are both capable of also feeding yourselves. That being said, like I said, when you enter a relationship, you're actually creating something together. So it's not like there's a puzzle piece and then you click together and then that's it. You're actually evolving together. So Trevor and I have grown a lot in the last few years that we've been together. We had to navigate some of these, like, how do we navigate conflict? How do we bring up things that are uncomfortable for both of us? Like, it's not like we're both perfect people that suddenly had like the same cleaning schedules and sleeping schedules, like all these real life things that show up. So we have to be able to talk about that and be able to navigate it in a way that makes sense. We both make adjustments. Like, he likes a really clean sink. This is like the age-old example I think that all couples do, but like, he loves a really clean sink throughout the entire whole day. And I'm one of those people who, like, I would just put all the dishes in the dishwasher at the end of the day. Okay. So like, how do we navigate that? How do we not just think it's like we're being dismissive of each other, but we're actually being respectful of what's needed and what kind of home we want to have?
Well, I think that's key. I had a couple that came in once and were arguing literally about who slapped the dishwasher in what way. And I was asked them, well, it's look at what's beneath it, because there's stuff beneath it. It's like, okay, why is this so important? Someone says, well, because otherwise I can't work, because my mind's muddled. My mother always slapped the dishwasher, or my mother never, or father never slapped the dishwasher. it's about stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's, okay, so I hear that it's difficult for you and I leave my coffee cups everywhere. I hear that. You feel chaotic. It makes you feel, and then you think I don't love you. In fact, maybe you think I'm actually doing it deliberately to really piss you off.
Right.
So you go to some quite interesting places, but like you're saying, it's creating a new map, isn't it? It's like, This is my map, this is your map of our emotions and our whatever, and now we need to create a new map. And how might that look?
Absolutely. Because what we discovered is that the way my brain works is having to clean in the moment, like in between my meetings and whatever is happening through the day, is like an extra task that I'm switching to do. Whereas I'd rather just do it all at once. But for him, his approach is, I feel like I can't focus if I know that there's dirty stuff in the sink. So I need to do it right away. And so how do we meet in the middle, right? So that I'm more aware of like, okay, if I actually have this moment, it's actually really not that big of a deal for me to clean this one dish and put it in the dishwasher. And for him to sometimes say, if there's a dish she's left in the dishwasher, sometimes I just clean it because I know she didn't have time. And so I'm just going to do it because this is what I need, right? So we actually have to be willing to meet in the middle and have a generosity of spirit in the relationship around that.
Yeah, I'm doing this because I love this person and I get why it's happened. It's not an attack. It's not because they're lazy.
Yeah.
It's a generosity of spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for you, it feels like a big journey, a big change of life that you've had. You started off here trying to fulfill your parents' expectations, then you went and did Lululemon. And then, so the pivot point is, what did it take for you to go, I'm going to change what I'm doing? Was it scary? Were you like, oh, I've got a mortgage, or, you know?
Yeah. Fortunately, I didn't have a mortgage, but it was scary. I mean, it's always scary to leave the thing that is familiar. Lululemon in very many ways raised me. It was such a wonderful place to land after college. You know, I got to spend time with the best fitness professionals in very cool cities. It was a very fun job. I think a lot of people get those early entry level jobs and are like, this is soul sucking. Like, I had a lot of fun. It really was my best life, really, until I was meant to do something else. But it was terrifying. It was a really safe place to fail. I really loved it. I was good at it. So it was terrifying to stake a claim. And obviously, even more so when you decide to create your own business, right? Like, being a coach meant I would have to start my own business. And I had no idea how to do that, what that even meant. Am I even any good at this? You know, I explained that situationship, you know, debacle. And I was like, how am I going to coach people if I am still kind of figuring this out on my own? So there was a lot of those questions. And really, I don't know, the universe kind of forced my hand. I got fired from Lululemon, which is a whole separate story. And it was very obvious to me that once I was fired and I was no longer chained to being in a physical retail store, I was going to move to this town in the mountains. A bunch of my friends had already moved there. It's a world-class climbing destination. And it kind of stole my heart the first time I visited. So I was like, okay, great. I'm going to move to Bishop. So I did. And that in itself was frightening. I'd always lived in big cities as an adult. So moving to a small town, you know, like packing my little Volkswagen and getting myself over the mountain pass to live there. It was a lot of adjustment, but there was this moment, and I always forget this part, but I actually didn't tell my parents I was moving until I'd already gotten there. And they had found out through like my sister-in-law's sisters, like had seen it on my Instagram or something. And then they asked my parents about it and they were like, what did you just do? So I remember explaining it to them and I said, Mom and Dad, 1, I have savings, so I'm going to be fine, even if this doesn't work out. And 2, I have to try this. Like, if I don't try this, I will regret this for the rest of my life. So I just have to do it. And that was it. That was kind of it. That was that quote, the Anais Nin quote of like, the risk it took to bloom was suddenly, or the risk it took to stay in the bud was suddenly too great. So you had to actually bloom. So I was like, I'm just going to have to try it. I'm just going to have to do the thing. I had a lot of free time because I really didn't have very many clients. I was learning, I was building that business. I read every relationship book I could get my hands on. I spent a lot of time climbing outside, a lot of time processing my own work. And it was really such a wonderful gift. And then COVID happened. So then I was just in it even more. But that was the pivot. It was really this, like, there's nothing else for me to do. Everything else has fallen away. I might as well give it a shot.
And did you meet Trevor there? Did he walk into a bar dressed in his hiking gear? Did you go, oh, my heart doth beat so fast? Beep, 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 beep.
No. No. And I think this is also a fun part. Like when clients are like, I just want to meet my person. I'm like, your person is on their journey too. So you have to trust that like they're making their way to you too as quickly as they can. Trevor and I actually moved to the town at the same time, but didn't meet each other until years later. Because he was in another relationship and I was just sorting out all my crap. And we had a mutual friend, and she's funny. She's lived in town a long time, and she'd kind of just been, scheming it in the background. And when Trevor's last relationship ended, she was kind of like immediately in this, like, you guys should meet. So eventually we all went climbing together and we met, but it wasn't until a few months later that Trevor and I actually went on a date. And then Trevor and I dated for 6 weeks, broke up, and then we got back together 6 months later. So it was a bit of a journey.
Why did you break up?
Because we were still in our stuff. It was such an obvious, like I had done so much work. I had done so many things, but there was something about Trevor we kind of played the classic, like I got anxious and he got avoidant type of thing. And Trevor actually had been in a lot of relationships where he was a bit of a caretaker. He didn't always articulate what he was feeling. He just sort of showed up and organized around the other person. And for me, it was like he wasn't there. So I would just poke. I could just pull out all the poking. Like I could be like slightly mean, all the things. And it ended just sort of just like slipping out of our hands. So we ended it. We stayed friends. But we took time apart. I went and lived in New York for a little bit, just to like spend more time with my parents. And when I came back, we had dinner and something was different. He actually started sharing more about himself. I really didn't have it in the cards that we were going to get back together. I was really like, that was done. But he showed up differently. And I had kind of let go of I had let go of needing him to be any different. And so that combination of him actually showing up and me not needing it actually worked out. So then we rebuilt our relationship from there.
Wow, I love that. I let go of needing him to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
And that,
well, it's a very clear thought, but it's a very clear thought.
yes. It really came from actually, so when I went to New York, I drove back across the country with my dad, which is something he always wanted to do, which was a very sweet thing for us to do. And in that time spent, I realized I kind of always wanted my dad to be more emotionally articulate or forthcoming with how he was feeling. And when I let that go and just gave him space, he would be, but he just needed a little more spaciousness to do it. And that somehow clicked for me. It took like the charge out of that relationship. And so I was like, oh, what if I just showed up in this way kind of all the time? And when I met Trevor again, like that was really how I showed up, of like, you can take the time that you need. And it turned out that he had already been doing a lot of that work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So would you like to share with everybody where they can find you and what do you do? Maybe just give a little idea of what you take clients through. I know that's quite a big thing, but just an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to find me is my website, jessicayip.com. There's space for free consultations. There's also space to find my newsletter, which I love. I love writing. It's on Substack. What I do with clients. So for the most part, I'm really quite focused on the calling in the one work, because most people who are successful in a lot of ways, but haven't necessarily found that same success in love, are finding that their patterns keep replaying themselves and they don't really know how to get out of that loop. So what we're really looking at is outgrowing those patterns, outgrowing the identity that created those patterns. So that's the work I'm doing with people for the most part. Within that, I start to add in, I'm creating something new called dream building. I'm in a test with a couple really wonderful people in my coaching group right now, where we are also showing up for our entire lives with this sense of power and magic. Like, what does it look like to shift our identities in a way that allows us to show up fully for our contribution in the world, for these big career changes, to say that I've lived this life with someone else's idea of success in my mind, and how do I come home to me and what I really want to be doing. And a lot of times our romantic relationship has been doing the same thing of like, I thought it was supposed to look like this, so I've just been playing this game. But now I'm realizing what really makes me happy is over here. And what courage might it take to start living my life from informed by this, by what I really, really, really want, and start showing up for that.
Brilliant.
That's what we're doing.
Thank you so much. So jessicayip.com, yeah?
Yeah, you got it.
That is how to find Jessica. So the last thing to do is to say thank you so much for coming on How to Have Extraordinary Relationships and sharing all this, finding your voice. It's been so beautiful and helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. It was a joy. Thank you, everyone who's listening.